analytics-driven strategy community. I'm really excited to be with you today. Your host, I'm Fatima El-Wakeel. I create the right strategies and ecosystems for successful analytics transformation. In our August LinkedIn Live, I have a very special guest today. We're going to chat over coffee, as we always do. Yep. So with me today is Bill Schmarzo. He's the Dean of Big Data. Bill Schmarzo is the Dean of Big Data. He's an influencer and innovator. He is recognized in an industry as the leader in big data, data science, design thinking, and data monetization. He integrates these disciplines to drive organization empowerment and digital transformation. Hello, Bill.
Fatima, how you doing? Thanks for having me. And I guess it's good evening there, right?
Yeah, I know. It's 7 p.m. my time now here in the UK. What is it, your time? It's 11, I think?
It's 11 in the morning.
It's morning still.
Yes.
So if you're watching live now, please share with us your questions. And if you're watching on replay, please also do your comments and we'll definitely answer it afterwards. But yeah, please share your comments with us and questions, and we make sure to answer them. Bill has one of the great books that I've read in the last few years. He released a book called The Economics of Data Analytics and Digital Transformation. And that book is really inspirational. I loved it, and I started it and I finished it in a day. That's how I couldn't really put it down. And Bill, one of the things that you said in your book was a sentence that I think it kind of stuck in my head, which was, if you want to change the game, change the frame. And I loved that because, especially in data and analytics, we don't do that often. So let's chat about this a bit more.
Yeah, no, excuse me. I think the challenge we have in our profession is that we tend to do the same old things and expect better results. That we don't sometimes challenge ourselves to let go of preconceived ideas, embrace new ones, and then find ways to blend it together. You, in your introduction, you said that I look to blend data science, design thinking, economics, and these things together. And I find that when you stop and look across a broader frame of what you're trying to do, that you have huge success. Let me give you a really, really simple example. A lot of companies I talk to are struggling to unleash the economic value of their data. They're all struggling, and they're buying more and more technology, and they're spending more and more time on their data governance and data quality, and they're doing all this work in the data, but they haven't spent the time to understand, well, how does the organization create value, and how can the data then support the value creation? It's like taking the frame, instead of thinking about it from a data to a business perspective, let's just switch it around. I start with the business, what's important to the business, because the business knows that, right? They know how they create value. They know how they're going to measure value creation. And now what we can do as data scientists and data engineers and data practitioners is now we can figure out where and how we can leverage data and analytics to help drive that. So sometimes it's a simple case of taking a framework you currently have, just twisting a little bit and realizing, wait a second, if I do it this way, then everything looks different.
Sometimes all it needs is a different perspective, as you said, looking at just moving it a bit. You mentioned something now, Bill, and I just want to highlight it a bit about actually value creation or value driven. And you said that in the book. And I always, when I do projects as a practitioner, always say it's not the data, because data alone really doesn't do anything. It's the value that the data creates. So, and I want you to kind of let's just chat about this also a bit, because a lot of people just like, oh, let's do analytics, let's do data analytics, data is important, let's do data-driven decisions. And I'm like, well, value is driven through data, but data alone really doesn't do anything.
Right. I detest the word data-driven. I think that's such a cop-out term, when in reality, what we should be is value-driven. Here's again, one of these examples of just changing the frame a little bit, right? Don't be data-driven. I mean, like you said, data in itself has no value. In fact, I think anybody who's a data practitioner would have a hard time distinguishing signal from noise in the data. The value of the data cannot be ascertained in isolation of the business. And so the conversation we need to have first is around the business value. Now, that sounds simple. Oh, I just start talking about the business. But remember, we're ultimately going to be building, in some of these cases, AI models. And AI models look to optimize across a wide variety of variables. If you give an AI model a very scarce number of variables, you will get unintended consequences. Look what's going on social media, right? Social media is optimizing on clicks, views, and likes. And what we're seeing is a barrage and an echo storm of confirmation bias in what we see on social media, right? No, when you think about value creation and you think about how we're going to apply it from an AI perspective and how we're going to measure it from an economics perspective, look, these things blending together, right? Value is not just from a financial perspective. There's operational value, there's customer value, right? There's also employee value, there's environmental value, there's society value, there's diversity value. I'd even argue there's spiritual value, right? And when you start thinking about value creation, we need to be more broad, because the AI models will do exactly what we ask them to do from an optimization perspective. And if we don't give them a balanced set of variables and metrics, then yes, we will have terminators walking up and down the streets here. So this value conversation is critical, and it's more than just a change the frame conversation. It's, as data scientists, we have to be involved in pushing the edges of that value conversation to understand what are the metrics and KPIs against which the organization is going to measure progress and success.
This is so true. And I think you touched on the values in the AI model, and how I always say that AI models, they don't have really a brain. Like, you feed them the value, you feed them the features, and you tell them what values they should take into account. And if you're not doing that, they'll just think that whatever values they have is right, because they don't have a brain. As humans, we know what is right from wrong.
Exactly right. Here's the interesting thing here, Fatima, is I think that ultimately AI is going to force us humans to become more human. That we're going to have to rely on the natural human aspects that make us different from machines. For example, empathy. Empathy is a very important human characteristic. And you can call it maybe spiritual or whatever you want to do, but empathy is the starting point for the design thinking process. And empathizing with your customers, walking in their shoes, understand what they're trying to do, right? So, but another very important human characteristic is curiosity and an inquisitive mind, right? We're all born with a natural curiosity. I remember when I was, 5 years old or 6 years old, taking apart my dad's radio, right? And when I put it back together, I said, "Look, Dad, there's extra parts, right? Look what I saved you. I'm so smart, right?" But what happened? Yeah, I was like, well, I was in big trouble on that one. But society does everything in its power to drive curiosity out of the humans. We go through standardized curriculums and standardized schools and standardized classes and standardized classrooms to take standardized tests, right? We use everything is standardized, and then we go to the business world and we have standardized job descriptions with standardized payroll, we pay grades and standardized performance reviews, sitting in standardized office like a bunch of prairie dogs, right? Everything that we do was driven toward, we're being forced to standardization. And if we do allow that to happen, then we will lose the game to AI. We can't. Standardization is not what humans do well. We do well, color outside the line sometimes, right? Push the edges. We need to embrace that which makes us human, which is around empathy for those we serve, and a natural curiosity for how we can solve some of these very wicked, hard problems.
I think it's also, if it wasn't for our curiosity and all that, we wouldn't have been where we are, like working through AI or all that. If we just
Right.
follow processes and procedures, we wouldn't be where we are today. So sometimes just thinking out of the box really helps a lot.
Yeah. Think outside the box. In fact, redefine the box.
I like
Redefine
that.
the box, right? We can do that.
Remember the article you wrote?
Yeah. So the idea that, what is innovation? Well, to a certain part, innovation is being curious. It's having an inquisitive mindset. It's trying to figure out, how does that work and how can I make it work better? And not being afraid to color outside the lines, trying to figure out what are the things that can make it work better.
I think it's having this kind of, I don't know, drive to try something new. Because even in business, a lot of the time when there is a project and you're trying to do the business case, and you say, oh, you know what, we might do this, or we might. People's like, oh, but we haven't done that before, or it wasn't successful, and we're like, let's do it differently. Maybe we can do something else. Who did we miss last time? Who wasn't on board? Or, and I think this is the thing we miss a lot, especially in businesses.
Thanks.
Comment about Bill's t-shirt.
My shirt, yeah, Tommy Bahama, baby. It's always it's always summertime in California, baby. But let me riff on that. Mm-hmm. Try something new. Most managers hate it when their employees come to them and say, let's try something new. Mm-hmm. Most management has been geared and is measured on not trying something new. You get a standardized set of metrics and KPIs against which you're going to measure performance. We do all the annual quarterly planning process and how have you done against your goals, right? Those goals become etched in stone like the 10 commandments, right? Management doesn't want its employees to sometimes try something new. Curiosity is almost like a disease for some organizations to be avoided. And I got to admit, as a manager, I had a guy on my team, very creative. He was a design thinker, and he was always coming to me with new ideas. And it drove me nuts. As a manager, I was like, I'm not being measured on that. But it was up to me to basically make room for him to have ideas. As a manager, it's my job to make sure that I'm trying to unleash all the greatness in all my employees. So I had to step back and realize I am the hindrance here. He's got ideas. Now, maybe not all of them are good, but you know what? He had one that was a game changer. He had absolutely one that was like, oh my gosh, right? And he's had many times, right? And we need to embrace this idea that let's try something new. Now, we've got goals we got to achieve. We're trying to do certain things. We're trying to satisfy customers and ship products and keep the plant operating, all these kind of operational things, right? But there's no reason why we shouldn't be creative and trying to do these things better, more efficiently, and more beneficial to more stakeholders.
This is true. I think you hit here really on something really important, Bill, which is as managers, sometimes we've been doing it so long, and sometimes having those like young employees with us in the teams, they come up with very bright ideas, and we're so focused on what we're measured on. And I'm guilty as well, I think, because sometimes to be honest, sometimes like, okay, well, even having those chats with my my team, and I was like, okay, what is your career? What do you want to do? And what's your future? What are your thoughts? Because they come with all those crazy things. I'm like, how did you even think about that?
But you're spot on, is that so there's a difference between managing and leading. Let's be really clear, right? Managers manage, they manage the numbers that are set in front of them. They word try something new is a 4-letter word to them. They don't want it. But as leaders, our job is to empower our employees. Let's be really clear, as leaders. And so we have to differentiate between managers, and we have a lot of people who are managers who have gotten to where they are and certainly don't want to rock the boat, and leaders who basically are on the boat all the time, shaking the damn thing up, right? And so, I think I'm a really lousy manager. In fact, I know I'm a terrible manager. I'm an awful manager. But I hope And I try to strive to be a good leader where I can empower people to try something new, because it's a very, very selfish thing. When I've got people on my team who I'm letting try something new and they learn something new, I learn too. I gain from that. I grow from that. So I do it for very, very personal reasons, because when you empower people, people have great ideas. You used a term earlier, Fatima. You talked about different perspectives. We must learn to embrace different perspectives. If we're ever going to get over some of these challenges we face as society, we need to be able to embrace and listen to different perspectives. Now, different perspectives are different than different opinions, right? Opinions are opinions, but usually when somebody has a perspective, there's usually a rationale behind that perspective. And I want to ask questions then about, so what is your rationale for your perspective? Because what they might have is some nuggets in there that I may not agree with their perspective, but the nuggets inside, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's gold. And that's gold. And if I can take those two, and again, if I can blend them stuff I think is good, I might be able to synergize to something that's, the best option, instead of compromising to the least worst option.
This is true. Yes. And I think as you said, it's difference between a leader and a manager. And a leader is always like more inspirational and is able, even when someone provides a perspective like, oh, that's a bit like, doesn't really add much value. They go and say like, okay, let me just dig more deep and understand more, as you said, the nuggets in it. And how did you reach that? What's your rationale behind it? And I love this word, Bill, when you said it's the rationale behind it. What was your thinking? Because it can be a different region, different market, and they actually know it better than we do.
Oh my gosh. There you hit the nail right on the head. There are people out there who have these different perspectives, who are, I don't want to say expert, but they're more experienced in these spaces. And as a leader, if you think you know all the answers, and if you think you know all the answers, you might as well just die. Because why hang around the planet anymore? There's nothing more to learn. It might just stick you in the ground, you're done, right? But it's a leader. Yes, I want to empower my people, but as a leader, I want to grow as well. And this brings up a really hard problem for a lot of leaders, and one that I have personally wrestled with many times, which is my ability to unlearn. That I have a perspective that I think is golden, that is one that's maybe worked for me for years and years, and I've used it successfully. And then all of a sudden somebody comes along with a different perspective on it. Now, it's real easy to poo-poo them and say, well, that's not how we do it around here. This works. But you've got to constantly willing to challenge how you think about things. And that might mean you're going to let go of something you believe is gospel. Right? You can't climb a ladder without letting go of the rung below you. At some point in time, you got to let go. You got to trust and reach up and hope there's something to grab a hold of. That's scary for people who are in a job. They think that 9 to 5, and they're just happy to be where they are. These people don't want their frame changed, and the vast majority of people don't want their frame changed. But I would guess that the people who are dialing into this conversation, they're here because they're seeking something new, and they want to see other perspectives. Excuse me.
I think, I love how you kind of pictured it about climbing a ladder and actually letting go of the step below. And I guess this is also especially, I think with AI, this is even more difficult because it's an area that is challenging on its own. And if we're looking at, successfully having AI in business, I think, remember, like in your book, you had a couple of examples, and you also spoke about Orphan Analytics. And I was like, oh my God, it's one of the chapters, and I loved it. But the examples and how those two companies kind of did something that you're just like, oh, they're actually monetizing data and they're using AI.
Yeah. It's that change the frame conversation. I think that we, as on so many different fronts, are totally unprepared for AI. And the reason why I say that is because we're used to using with, multivariate regression analysis and cluster analysis and association analysis, where we're looking for, for correlations in the data. AI is an environment that's going to continuously learn and adapt, right? It's going to continuously run and get smarter and adapt. How we think about building analytics in an AI world is very different than we used to do for building analytics in the previous world, and we're not prepared for that. We have to spend more time understanding the cost of the model being wrong. And what I mean by that is, you think about, you build an AI model and you have your false positive and false negatives. Well, in order for a model to learn and to overcome confirmation bias, it needs to learn from the mistakes it makes. The false positive, the person they hired that they shouldn't have hired, or the false negative, the person you didn't hire that you should have. And thinking through how us as humans are going to instrument and try to measure that is where creativity really kicks in. So we've got a long ways to go in the AI world. It's not like other analytics because of this ability to continuously learn and adapt, which is why this idea of, this travesty called Orphan Analytics is such a bogus concept, in the sense that, God, story here, right? So one of the larger research firms, right, tech advisory firms, they came to our company, and the question they asked was, well, how many ML models do you have? And I looked at it and I said, that's the wrong question to ask. Shame on you. That is the wrong question to ask. The question should be, how many ML models do you have that are continuously learning and evolving? That's the more powerful question. You're asking a question from 20 years ago. The world's changed. Change your frame.
Exactly. Yes. And if we explain a bit more, because I know some of the audience here, not like some of the people are interested in AI, but they haven't done AI. So can we kind of shed a light a bit, explain a bit more about Orphan Analytics? What is Orphans?
Sure. So Orphan Analytics are analytics that were built for a one-off purpose, probably very successful in addressing that problem, but they were never engineered to be continuously learning and adapting. And so they address a problem, and these ML models, over time, the effectiveness, they drift, right? And because they probably weren't engineered in a way that was continuously monitoring itself, the models drift, they become less and less effective. And what happens is the person who wrote that ML model, Bob, right? Bob writes this thing, doesn't document it, doesn't really, there's no one knows how to keep this thing up and running. And then Bob either leaves the company or takes a job or something, right? So you've got this orphan analytic that someone built that's now not only not an asset, it's now a liability because no one knows how to fix it and keep it up and running. So this idea of orphan analytics, which I came across probably 5 or 6 years ago when I did this research project at University of San Francisco. We were trying to determine the value of data, a whole conversation, which is so full of unlearning moments for me that it was a total epiphany. But we kept talking to very advanced analytic organizations, and they kept talking about these orphan analytics. They would build these things, they would have them out there, but no, they weren't documented. And they said, they talked about how these things became liabilities. And it didn't really occur to me how much of a missed opportunity it was to have these orphan analytics. Now here comes AI, where I can build an environment where it has the right variables and metrics against which it's measuring, right? The KPIs, that's getting smarter every time it learns. Like the autonomous car or the autonomous vacuum cleaner, right? It's getting smarter. It's learning where things are. And now these analytic assets and how we build them, we have to change how we build them. We need to change the frame for how we think about analytics, not solving a one-off problem, but build them in a sense so whatever happens around them, they can adapt. You get a pandemic, you get environmental changes, you get social unrest. This thing is learning and adapting and moving accordingly.
And this is really important. This is like, as you said, in so many, even not yet, just normal projects, analytics projects, so many times, as you said, Bob leaves, he's done a great job, but then it's orphan, it has no parents, it has no one to kind of look after. That's what I was saying. It's just a bit And a lot of the time, I always highlight to my team when I'm working, and even when I do any presentations or something outside, it's like, please, data governance, please, documentation, because it's so important. And with the power of AI, you create, as you said, quite a complex model. And you want, when a pandemic hits, it's just like kind of copes, and you can see how to add value. So I love how you explained it. It's really, thank you for that.
All I do is I watch some of these leading companies and what they're doing, and I go, oh wow, like what Tesla is doing with their full self-driving, module, how they're building autonomous vehicles. It's like, folks, there's a real life lesson about how you can build these analytic assets that, as Elon Musk said, he said a great quote, right? He believes that when you buy a Tesla, you're buying a car that appreciates in value the more it's used, not depreciates, right? And anybody who's got an accounting background, immediately their head explodes. Like, wow, what does that mean, right? The assets automatically depreciate. You get depreciation schedules and such. No, he's changed the frame. He's building assets that actually appreciate in value. They get more reliable. They get more accurate. They get more, more granular, right? They get smarter the more they're used. So it's, again, it's the AI world's got great potential for us that we really need to think more clearly and broadly about how we're going to bring this into our environments.
And I love how you explain that in Tesla, like, things are appreciating, like, because we are normally looking at those things as depreciation. And I think this is the bit where Tesla came in and it actually changed the frame.
Yes, exactly. Well, and by the way, everybody thinks that their differentiation, they're an electric car, right? Everybody wants to be like Tesla. They're building electric cars. Like, no, they're electric car that's invested heavily in autonomous. They've got 1 million cars plus running around the streets, gathering tons of data about what goes on. Even when their autopilot isn't turned on, it runs in what's called shadow mode. So it's learning from the humans all the time, and all that information is getting shoveled back up into a giant simulator cloud in the sky that Tesla never talks about, but is out there, right? And then they're learning from this thing, so they're back propagating it back, so that anything that one car learns, all the other 1 million cars also learn the next day. God, that's brilliant.
I know, it's just, and you also mentioned about Google, because there was in the chapter, you also mentioned about one of the Google models when it actually left it open source so that people would come in and change things and it would learn.
Yeah, the TensorFlow story is a brilliant story. Yeah, right. Google's arguably their most valuable asset, TensorFlow, that drives their entire organization. They open source it. Now, traditional business would go, oh, we're going to put all kinds of patents on this and et cetera, et cetera. No, they open source it, because the more people will use it across more variety of use cases, the smarter it's going to get. And what Google has mastered is how to use TensorFlow to make money, right? It isn't TensorFlow that makes money. It's how they use it. So if you're going to make TensorFlow better for them, they're all in. Thank you very much. It's like printing money. And literally, if you look at what their profits have done lately, they are literally printing money over there.
I know, it's quite, I think this is the bit, so they are using everyone to kind of, not using, but, making use of really the mind and the human, and people want to learn, and Google also wants to have this kind of learning. So it's brilliant. And I think this is the bit, is like, because today we're trying to speak about AI and, how to successfully use it in business. And you've given a couple of examples about Tesla and Google. And we've spoken about Orphan Analytics, and because I'm just aware of time, and I don't know, like, Bill, would you like to kind of share, I don't know, any other thoughts if people would like to successfully use AI in business?
Yes. So AI from a conceptual perspective is very straightforward. It's basically, all it's doing is playing a game of hotter and colder. Remember, as kids, you ever played the game hotter and colder? You put a blindfold on, you're trying to find, so you're getting hotter, getting colder, right? The only difference is that wherever you're going after is moving. So this thing is that there's a constant feedback where it's always learning. Conceptually, it's very straightforward. What we need to do is to architect the problems we're going after so that we are putting them in, so that we're targeting how do we learn. We don't need to have the perfect answer. especially when we're making predictions, right? For one thing, the minute you think you've got it perfect, it's not perfect. But let me end with this last quote, this last point. The economies of learning are more powerful than economies of scale. What does that mean? It means that the organizations that are going to be most successful in the future, and us as professionals, are those of us who can learn more quickly than others. And so that's what AI is all about. Whether it's, you think about deep learning or machine learning or reinforcement learning or federated learning or associated, all different learning techniques, it's all about learning and adapting. So as humans, we also need to make sure that we are investing in learning and adapting as well.
And I love how you always kind of link analytics and AI and all that to economics. And I really hope, I know that you've done your Schmarzo economic digital asset valuation theorem, and I hope you get the Nobel Prize for it.
It would look good on this shirt, wouldn't it? Think about this shirt with a Nobel Prize bling hanging right here.
Right? And then you'll come with the Nobel Prize and we have another chat.
There we go, yeah.
I know. No, good luck with that. And I hope you really get that, because I think the book is brilliant. Your theorem is another that needs like I guess like a LinkedIn live session in itself, because it's very deep. But maybe we can do that as well, because
we can do more.
Yes, because I think that theorem really, it needs like a whole session to kind of really deep dive, because it's very, very rich.
The reason why I've such a big believer in economics, there's many reasons why, but I know when I talk to executives, if I talk, they don't want to talk about technology. Most executives don't give a crap about technology, but they do care about economics. They do care about creating value and wealth. So if I want to be relevant and leveraging all this data and analytics I have, I'm going to talk the language of business. And it just happens to be that data and analytics are very unique economic assets that can do things like no other asset can. So when I go to the business executives, I am bringing something unique, a game changer that can change their frame in order for them to win the game.
Yes. Thank you very much, Bill, for the chat today. Really enjoyed it a lot, and it was very insightful.
Thank you.
And just want to tell the listeners, thank you for logging in and having us live. This chat was live on LinkedIn, on YouTube, and on Twitter. You'll find the recording on YouTube, and you can you can see them again on the 3 platforms. You'll find, I'll share also, it will be on a podcast. So the Analytics Driven Strategy podcast, I'll share it next month so that everyone has access to it. But thank you again, Bill. This was really very inspirational. As always, I love our chats.
They are fun. Yes, very good questions. I love the provocative conversation. That's how we learn, right? We got to push each other.
I know. Thank you very much. And thanks everyone for being here today, and see you next month. Bye.